Hey there. Welcome to another Tesla Motors Club podcast. My name is Lewis.
I'm Doug.
And I'm Mike.
In today's episode, we'll talk about some highlights from the Tesla Q4 earnings meeting. Also, Tesla appears to be facing some major sales downturns globally. And even though it's only been a few weeks, we've already got some movement on our predictions from our last episode. So we'll touch on those. All that and more, where episode 72 starts now. Alrighty. How are you, gentlemen? We're back.
Pretty good.
We're
back.
Just dandy.
Just dandy. Since the last episode, Doug and I got to hang out in person.
Oh yeah.
Doug visited in Austin.
Yeah, I came out for the Astro Awards. We briefly mentioned it in the last episode, but yeah, it's just Tim Dodd, Everyday Astronaut, does these things. It's like the second one he's done in person, and it's pretty cool. Basically, a bunch of enthusiastic space nerds, but it was a 2-day event, and it had panel discussions about things we find interesting: new space versus old space. Apollo 16 astronaut Charlie Duke was there, and he was pretty cool, and he did a keynote.
Cool.
A couple of the people from the Polaris Dawn mission were there. During the awards, our likely next NASA administrator, Jared Isaacman, at least came in with a pre-recorded thing. He couldn't be there in person. But yeah, it was pretty cool. Obviously SpaceX and Rocket Lab and those, companies got a lot of mention. And so yeah.
The Space Force was there.
Yeah, the Space Force was there to recruit. I don't know that they had a very useful recruiting event, but they were sponsors, and I guess they have to try to recruit if they're going to sponsor.
Yeah.
So, what did you get out of it, Lewis?
I mean, I thought it was cool. Some of the talks, getting to see Apollo astronaut that walked on the moon. It was really neat, and hearing him speak in person, and some of the other folks that have been to space. That was really neat. There's definitely some interesting people that were there. It was kind of like going to a Comic-Con or something. I felt like, where I was just surprised at the the gamut of people that attended. Some folks that have like no background in science, no knowledge about technology or space or anything like that. So that was kind of interesting. But yeah, it was really interesting. I had fun.
Yeah, it's cool. I got to meet Scott Manley. Talked to him a couple
Manley.
times.
He's so cool. That guy's awesome.
He did a DJ session, the evening after the first day. So that was pretty cool. So
fly safe.
Yeah. You know what's funny though? With all the stuff going on with the SpaceX stuff, Elon Musk was only mentioned by name once. I kind of felt like everybody was trying to avoid mentioning him, because that was literally days after the inauguration.
They definitely avoided that. It was noticeable.
Yeah. I was like, let's not mention the elephant in the room. And probably in response to certain gestures he made just a few days prior. And the only person to mention was Dr. Robert Zubrin, who's kind of a firebrand, kind of interesting guy. But that was kind of funny. But yeah, it was kind of odd and obvious, So, but anyway, yeah, that was cool. So I'll probably go next year. I enjoyed it enough that I'll go back.
Yeah, I will probably plan to go and have better. I'll get better tickets.
Yeah,
they were sold out of all the VIP things by the time I decided to go. So Doug got to do some things that I didn't get to, but next year I'll be better prepared.
The tickets were tiered. The highest level was, not anything I would pay for this kind of thing. I think it was like $1,000 or something. And they called that the apogee level, I think. I got the orbital, I think, which was...
you were orbital.
which was like maybe $300, which was still kind of a lot. But it got me, what did it do? Two main things. I got, during this evening, like nightclub thing, there was like a VIP sort of level, and it gave you a chance to sort of like,
You got
chat
to
with some
look
people.
down upon the peasants.
Well, the main benefit of that was I got to chat with some of the,
Right.
the panelists, like Scott Manley. I got to chat with them out there. But it was a loud environment. It wasn't really like the kind of environment to chat with people. And then they did do like a quote unquote meet and greet kind of thing that was scheduled. But that was not good. I think there were so many of us at that level. They had it kind of set up like, I've never been to one of these fan conventions, but it was like, like a con type thing where you're lined up and you get 1 minute with each person. I was like, what is this? It's like speed dating or whatever. That was, because some people you actually want to talk to, and some people you don't necessarily want to talk to, and then you're just like standing there, hi, and it's just weird. That was weird.
Yep.
So I would do that differently. I mean, really, that kind of thing should just be like, set it up like, cocktail tables, and you just, can kind of chat with the person you actually care to chat with. And, I suppose you have the danger of somebody hogging somebody in that case, but still, that would have been more natural than this thing, this speed dating setup. That was
They
just
could have
not
done
good.
separate lines, but then you'd have one really long line and a lot of short lines.
That would
Oh,
be
short
even
lines
more
are no
like a
line.
Comic-Con kind of thing.
Right. Yeah.
But I think that maybe would have been preferable too. I don't know.
Yeah.
It just was weird, and the venue to do that in, it was like in a theater, which didn't make any sense either. It needed more like a like a ballroom or some kind of big flat open space. So anyway, my only complaint about the event. Otherwise, it was very well done, and it was cool. Yeah, so I enjoyed it.
Indeed. So
Indeed.
the other big thing that happened since last episode is they officially had the Q4 earnings meeting for Tesla. And we learned all kinds of stuff. There was a lot of things that come out of that. Some
Well,
good, some bad.
Yeah.
Well, they spun it mostly good, but the funniest thing is, we just had our predictions episode, right? And we don't do the show that often, but we did it. I think it was the 19th of January, right?
Mhm.
And then the earnings report was what? Just I guess maybe 2 weeks ago at this point. And it's like so many things we were talking about already had some movement on it. So maybe we should dig into those.
Indeed. See which things we were already correct on. No, I'm sure there were a few that we were not. So I mean,
Well,
like,
let me just pull
you have
one
the
up.
li-
Let's
do you
see.
have the list? Excellent.
Yeah, I do have the list. Okay, for one, we should fix. So this is one of our questions. Will another vehicle? Now we talked about this all last week. We said, will another vehicle, Tesla or otherwise, dethrone the Model Y as the world's best-selling car? Right? And our predictions were, Mike and I both said no. Model Y is doing pretty well. Will continue to do well. And Lewis, you said yes, some other car, and you thought it might be some BYD thing. Now the information we had as of the 19th of January was that the Toyota Corolla. The Toyota Corolla had outsold the Model Y. I don't remember by how much, but it had outsold the Model Y. Now, I listened to the earnings call, and during the earnings call, Elon's like, and the Model Y remains the best-selling car of the year. And I'm like, oh, really? So, Mike, so what's the truth here?
So it is the best-selling car in the world. Lewis and I were talking about this pre-show, and it's like, 1 point, what was it, Lewis? 1.8?
It's 1.09 million versus
Units.
1.08 million
Right.
units.
It's really tight. If you look at the Model Y as an EV only, it's got no competition. It's way ahead of everybody else. But if you look at an aggregate and you say worldwide, any vehicle being sold, the Model Y is still number one, barely. Next year, all bets are off. It's that close.
Yeah, but when in our last episode we had already thought that the Model Y was not the best-selling car because that's the numbers at the time. So it seems that new numbers came up. Tesla released additional numbers, and since then the Model Y barely squeaked it out.
So you should consider how Tesla handled Q4. They had all kinds of incentives. They heavily discounted. They were pushing inventory out as hard as they could, to try to get to their numbers. Now, they still missed their sales numbers by 16,000 of what the street was expecting and what they actually sold. So they did not hit their numbers on one side of the conversation, but they're still the best-selling car in the world, barely.
They managed to make up the ground they were down for the year.
Well, it's still impressive.
It's very impressive.
And so thinking that the Model Y had lost position, we then were like, okay, well, will it regain the throne in 2025? And so with this new framing, that actually it remained the king for 2024. What's happening in 2025 then?
I don't think so.
Losing it.
I think it's going to get dusted.
I mean, they have a new version of the Y available, right? So is that not going to drive some sales?
I didn't hear you because my screen just went blank.
Yeah, you froze for a bit.
I can answer.
It basically tried to brick my computer,
I heard you talking about them.
So the new Model Y, like the refreshed Model Y,
out.
Juniper is out. And yes, that will definitely help numbers for sure. Absolutely will help numbers. However, if we look at it from the best-selling car in the world, Tesla really benefits from global sales, and global sales are majorly under attack for a number of reasons. I think Germany right now is down 60% in January.
Norway's right behind them. Norway's tanked.
So Europe sales for it has gone way down. The U.S.'s biggest markets for EVs, like California, also way down. I think it's down around like 15 or 16%, something like that.
Well, and we should add, Tesla sales, EV sales are down. Everybody else's EVs are up.
Correct.
It's very specific to the brand.
Correct. And that being said, though, it's also there's connections to, while the model's newer and nicer and has cool features, there's also things around like EV tax credits going away and other kinds of, drama and uncertainty around that. So it's not like, new car, we're definitely selling a lot more. So do I think it's going to sell well? I still think it'll be Tesla's best-selling vehicle. I think it'll do well. It may even do comparable to what it did this year, last year. This year might be comparable. But growth, I don't see it growing. I think it's likely declining a bit. And other companies are growing to fill the market growth. So I don't know. I'm thinking it's going to drop out. It will not be but I also didn't think it was going to have it last year, and I was almost right. But this year, I think it'll drop.
Yeah, I mean, the question is those worldwide numbers. Certainly in China, the competition is doing gangbusters.
It is fierce.
BYD is doing amazing things. I don't know what the culture is like in terms of going domestic. It used to be that the Chinese upper middle class, wanted European cars, for example, and certainly Tesla has some brand cachet there. But in Europe, for certain reason, we need to get Seb as a German and European expat, to get his input on that. But certainly, like, there's a lot of I say negative feelings about the Tesla brand in Europe, and it's happening in the U.S. as well. But of course, in the U.S., it's just more polarized. So anyway, I guess it sort of depends on your feelings of Elon, and I guess given his current role in the government, dude, how involved in Tesla is he really at all right now? And part of that big bonus package was to the at least I was there. I was at the shareholder meeting back. I don't remember what year it was, but it was in Mountain View. They used to hold it at the Computer History Museum in Mountain View, and when it was first proposed, if I'm remembering correctly, and the whole point of that thing was to keep Elon's attention on Tesla, and it seems to me his attention is barely on Tesla. So does this make any sense, really? So
Yeah, I mean, I think so on that, I believe the official statements or something around, it was like 3 or 4 months or something, and then he's going to be back. Like, so he's really supposedly only focused on the government stuff for a few months. We'll see what happens, but I think the plan, at least his public plan, is that he will be back focused on Tesla. I think a lot of it, though, at least, it's politically polarized. And from what I've been reading, the drop off on one side is not being made up yet by the rate of growth on the other. So while one side of the political spectrum is now distancing themselves, the other side is increasing, but not at a rate that equals the drop. So I think that's where the damage is. And the other thing is, a lot of people necessarily that are saying, say people that are against Elon are upset now for whatever political reasons that I won't get into. The problem there is they don't want to give any money to Elon through any means. So even if Elon had nothing to do with the company as far as day-to-day running, he still profits from it doing well. Mm-hmm. So a lot of that is they don't want to be involved with any of his brands, which is unfortunate for folks that, want those companies to do well. But
yeah, and I want Tesla to do well. I want SpaceX to do well. The others are kind of, whatever.
Boring.
Boring, yeah. I mean, the Boring Company is not impressive to me. It's just ridiculous, really. Okay, you can dig out a single lane hole. Okay, that's great. So, I mean, you could probably hire somebody to do that for you.
Let me throw something out to you guys and see what you take on it. So the Y is the best-selling EV by far. Mm-hmm. Model 3, second best-selling EV that Tesla owns. The X is like way down. They sold hardly any X's last year, 2024, even less than they did for the Model S.
And the X is actually more expensive than the Cybertruck right now.
Yeah, so I'm wondering, is it time for Tesla to kind of prune the product line a little bit?
No. No. What Tesla needs to do is actually spend some time on the X and the S and make them better. Yeah. Make them the flagship vehicles they should be.
So you think put capital into it to bring it up to spec and freshen it up?
Yeah, I think when they test something, like, oh, here's a new feature, it should be on those cars. That should be where it comes out, and then it should trickle down to, the 3 and the Y.
It seems kind of backwards right now.
Yeah. I mean, that was part of the reason, the sales of the S and the X actually went down quite a bit when the Model 3 came out. Like, oh, it's the Model 3, so it's the third car and it's more advanced, and Tesla had to they had to basically try to work on their, they don't really do marketing, but they do messaging. And they had to try to emphasize that, oh, it's actually a lower tier vehicle, but it clearly had newer technology at the time, and they only did an update in 2021, and that's been it.
Well, so this was actually a real conversation that came up about a week ago, where a friend was asking, why should I even look at the X when I've got Juniper sitting here? I mean, serious.
I would agree to some extent. Both are kind of bad at being sort of larger people movers. Like the third row in either one is kind of
and he
a joke, I guess.
He has an up and coming family, so be able to shuffle people around is crucial.
Well, Juniper is definitely a more advanced vehicle. There's no question about that. Yeah, dude, refresh the X. Make it better. It's not. I think that it should be in that segment, a sort of a larger SUV. Maybe increase the utility of it. That second row I was at the Model X unveiling event back in, let me think, it was probably 2014, I guess, and it was at the Tesla factory in Fremont, and they showed the thing, and part of what they showed was all the seats could lie flat, so you had this huge amount of space, and then somehow
Sure.
Elon got in his head that he wanted these captain seats on the second row, and then that meant
Which
a lot
don't
of
lie
delay. And they obviously don't lie flat, and that
Yeah.
meant a lot of delay in shipping the Model X. And the head of manufacturing, who actually spoke at our event in 2015, he ended up getting fired or scapegoated on that. He was some army vet guy who was really interesting dude. Gave a great talk. I should probably we have video of it. We should probably publish it, even though it's a decade old now. It might still be interesting. But so they didn't quite deliver what they promised with that vehicle. Now I think they did come up with a more conventional next row. But yeah, dude, now the Model Y, you can press a button and the seats lie flat. You should be able to, on the Model X, the thing should easily carry 6 people, or even 7 people very easily. They should design it to do that, and you should be able to press a button and all the rear seats lie flat, and you can, put stuff in it and increase the utility of the thing.
Would you say the X should kind of go toe to toe against the Rivian R2, up and coming R2?
Sure.
Upper scale, mid tier, SUV-esque.
Yeah,
for price point,
Yeah,
they already are.
It should be a freaking.
No kidding.
It should be a Land Rover. It should be
Right.
that's what the X should be. It should be a high end SUV type thing.
Because I like the X. It's a great car to drive. It's got
Yeah.
a really nice fit and finish, and it feels solid.
And
Feels
I like
kinda
that.
wide,
And I like that it is wide, but I like that canopy that it has in the front.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
They could probably tweak that a little bit, but like the way that it has like a line that kind of comes down, it's a little odd.
And you can get it in plaid. Just saying.
Yeah, you can get a performance.
That's true.
Performance X.
It's got the little decal on the back. It says plaid.
Well, I have to say, when I went on at the Model 3 event, when they first unveiled the Model 3, and I got to ride the Model 3, but then it was a really long line. It was going to take you hours if you're going to ride it again. But they had the Model X there too, and I was like, I'll ride in the Model X. And the dude took it through like an autocross type course, and I was blown away. I've never been in an SUV that handled
that
like
well.
that. I'm like, what the heck? I'm like, I'm holding on, and that was something else. So yeah, come on, make those cars better.
Well, my introduction to the X was I was getting my 3 serviced in my driveway, Mobile Ranger, and they actually called and said, "Hey, we're going to bring an X by for you to test drive."
Nice.
Okay. So they brought an X by, and I drove it around for 20-30 minutes while they worked on my 3.
How long ago was that?
That was a little over a year ago.
Okay.
Yeah. It was a hell of a great way to make a sale.
Well, they didn't make a sale,
They
but
didn't.
No, they didn't. Well,
But-
indirectly. Yeah. Ended up with
Yeah.
a Y.
yeah. Well, it's money wise, it's a better value. But make the X better. Come on.
It was X was a nice car, I have to say.
Yeah. Well, so anyway, let's move on. So we said that the sales have there's overall global sales downturn. So we're all guessing probably that the Y is not going to stay at the top worldwide. Is
No,
that the feeling?
unfortunately.
Why not?
Yeah, it's too bad. Okay, so another thing that came up is, and this one is particularly interesting to me. So the question was, when will Robotaxi start delivery? Now, as we do, we talked for a long time, and I kind of reframed this question. And one of the things I said, well, look, I think what Tesla needs to do is they need to, I think probably FSD is good enough right now that they could do a taxi service, geo-fenced. I suggest the city of Austin, do it in Austin. And I predicted that they would maybe not do it in 2025, but probably do it in 2026. And so
Sounds like June.
So what? So Lewis, what happened, Lewis? Can you tell
Yeah,
me?
yeah. I mean, they announced that they're planning on doing it by June this year.
Yeah,
So in Austin,
it was in the call.
geofenced robotaxi. It's unclear if it's going to be this new Cybercab vehicle or not. I think it is. It's heavily implied that it will be, but I don't know for sure. Certainly, nothing prevents them from doing it legally because Texas, as someone who lives here, they don't care. We already have, driverless cars, going around Austin. I think the law, when I looked it up, it's literally just they have to have the car insured as a normal car, as you would with a normal car. So it has to be insured, and it has to have sensors and cameras and things that'll collect data in case there's an incident. And that's pretty much the requirement. And as long as you do those things, you're allowed to do it.
Now that's the state of Texas. What about like the city of Austin? Which leans a little more liberal, and like how are they feeling about it?
Sure.
Liberal compared to who? Yeah.
So I mean,
Compared to the rest of Texas.
So I would argue that all big cities, even in red states, tend to be blue. And with how the state legislature is here, Austin doesn't really get to do a lot of things that it wants to because to disagree, because whenever they try to pass something that conflicts with state law, the governor and others kind of crack down and do things. There's been tons of drama, like stereotypically you can't get pulled over by an Austin cop because they're not going to pull you over for traffic infractions. But then every now and then, like the state will send in state troopers, and then you got to deal with, state troopers will pull you over for all kinds of stuff. So anyway, it is what it is. But we do have Waymo here. We do have self-driving cars running, and I think it's very likely that they're able to do this. Their headquarters is here in Austin, right? Tesla does bring in a lot of tax revenue into the state, so they have a lot of sway. It's very likely they'll be able to do this as soon as they think they're ready. Now, when they think they're ready versus when we think they're ready is not going to line up. So I think Tesla is likely to do this year. But as often with Elon's statements, it might get delayed to next year or even the year after. But more than likely, I would say 2026 is likely going to happen. But yeah, they're aiming for June this year.
So in that vein, I just got the latest update, 13.2.7. That was installed a couple days ago, and I put about.
Must be nice, Mr. Hardware 4.
Thank you. I've put something in the neighborhood of like 400 FSD miles on it already, including coming down the mountains yesterday. And I gotta say, it works pretty well. It's
impressive for Mike. Yeah,
it works pretty well.
He'll be coming down the mountain.
That's right. It actually stayed in the lane.
So I mean.
So
it's
I
possible.
think he's got a fighting chance. I think he has a fighting chance if it's geofence and he's got some guardrails set up for it.
Well, I mean, like I said, I think it's already good enough to do that kind of thing. Now, the question really is, what vehicles will they use? Especially in an urban environment, I would really like to have a nose camera. Surprise, surprise.
Okay.
And
that'd be Juniper.
That would be Juniper. That would be the Cybercab if they're ready for it.
That would be the Cybertruck. Which does
that
not
would
have
be
FSD yet.
No, I thought it does. The Cybertruck does have FSD at this point, doesn't it?
I'm not sure you can get people into that unsupervised driving.
Anyway,
I will look it up, but I'm not sure they have.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they finally got it, but I would.
But Juniper,
the Cybertruck would be a terrible vehicle to use as a robotaxi, though. Mainly because, again, the pedestrian safety is terrible for that vehicle. So if they just bump into somebody, or somebody's just crossing a crosswalk and just bumps into the Cybertruck, they're going to get lacerated. So I think that would be a terrible vehicle for that. And yeah, it would be all over the news. So I think it might be cool to ride in. I would certainly try it if I had the opportunity, but I think that would be a terrible choice.
I think the Y would
be
a
few
great choice.
Weeks.
You could put a lot of people in the Y, plus you got the back storage for luggage and everything. I think
the problem is they want to sell those Ys. The Cybertruck for a couple weeks now has had version 13. So so they are getting them. But yeah, I think it's likely going to be a Cybercab. And if it's not, so I think that's the vehicle they're aiming for. They don't need a lot of them. It's not like they need to be full manufacturing. You only need to do a couple.
That's
but,
true. All they got to do is get one
um,
out there, and they say, "Oh, we got it out."
Yeah.
I wonder if
I
they
mean,
have
honestly,
any.
oh, go
I was
ahead.
gonna say, I wonder if they have any special livery. Like maybe yellow wrap or a cab kind of look to it or what.
That would be funny, but I doubt it. It's probably going to be like the golden thing that we've seen, right?
If it's
in
the
videos.
Cybercab, it will probably be
Yes.
that. And that I think I had heard in one of the interviews, the gold was kind of a nod towards yellow cab kind of thing. But if it's like a 3 or a Y, I wonder
Sure.
if they'll do anything special for that. And I think they should use those too, because part of the promise is like, oh, my own car will be able to do this, right? And I think that'll be a good demonstration of that, like they did at the Cybercab event. They had 3s and Ys as well as these Cybercabs. So you don't agree?
I mean, I don't think they're going to let us do that for at least another year.
No, they won't. But part of them selling the car, part of them selling the cars to us is the promise that it will do that. And so if they have some demonstration of it doing it, even if it's in the sort of geofenced sort of environment, then maybe that helps sell them. And you said like they wouldn't have Ys because they're trying to sell them. I think that's helps them sell them. Like, oh, here they are out on the street
Out in the
doing
wild,
stuff.
actually working.
Yeah.
Fair.
I mean, I get the sense, from that call, right? We've had a global downturn in sales, and it really is the future of the company depends on autonomous and Optimus, right? I mean, that seemed to be what he was saying.
He was very clear that FSD was going to be the future and what drove the value of Tesla. It's not the car; it's the software.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
So let's.
Well, technically, he said Optimus, but we'll get into that.
Well,
But,
yeah.
So let's continue in that same vein. So another question we had for our predictions was, will Tesla offer an upgrade path for Hardware 3 owners? And then we went on about this, and we've talked about it before too. So I don't want to completely rehash it here. But the sense I got from, I think both, certainly from Mike, from Lewis a bit, is that certainly from Mike, they're not going to do it. They'll just, try to incentivize you to buy the next car, which I agree they would do. But during those conversations, I convinced myself, you know what? I think they can just make a new board, and that's probably what they'll have to do. And it looks like
I believe technically what I said was something like, I don't think that they are, but my copium says that they will because I want them to. But I don't. I agree. I did not think they were going to do it. But yeah, so here I can read the quote. I have Elon's actual quote on this when asked about it. This is the quote of Elon from the earnings.
He used the word honestly.
He said, I think the honest answer is that we're going to have to upgrade people's Hardware 3 computer for those that have bought full self-driving. And that is the honest answer, and that's going to be painful and difficult, but we'll get it done. Now, I'm kind of glad that not many people bought the FSD package.
No time frame is said.
Yeah. Okay, so a couple things. Let's just say. So he was responding. Another person from Tesla was saying, well, we're still working on Hardware 3. Like we're still trying kind of thing.
Still trying to make it work. Yeah.
And then Elon kind of cut in and was like, yeah, ain't gonna work. And we'll have to replace those computers. Mike talks about time frame. The thing is, replacing the Hardware 3 computers with Hardware 4 computers still might not be enough, right? I mean, the promise is that this is going to be a proper Robotaxi for me that can drive me, across country or whatever while I sleep. I don't know that Hardware 4 can do that. And what's interesting is if Hardware 4 can't do that and they're going to replace the Hardware 3 computers, are they going to have to replace the Hardware 4 computers also?
So if Tesla was smart and they were actually planning on doing this, they would be designing the Hardware 5 computer with this in mind, right? Because already the problem was the Hardware 3 to 4 changed the form factor, so you couldn't take the module from Hardware 4 and put it in a Hardware 3. They have to redesign the whole thing.
Yep.
In theory, though, they know both the Hardware 3 designs and the Hardware 4 designs, and they are making hardware 5 right now for the Cybercab. That's literally what is in very early limited production. It's not, not ramped up, not going to be in anybody's car anytime soon. But they could be designing that harness to actually work and be backward compatible as far as, the physical, hookup, as it were. Yes, if you won't be able to get to full hardware 5, you'd need new cameras, you'd probably need new wiring and all this other stuff that they might not be willing to do because it'll be difficult. But yeah, they should at least be designing that hardware 5.
I've read hints at cooling issues trying to go backwards.
Interesting.
That the processing power required in 4 and probably 5 with the AI driving everything is going to be a challenge.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's certainly possible. I think what the other engineer said at the event before Elon gave his, well, honestly, we're going to have to do it, realistically was fair. And what I'll say is, the challenge why they have the upgraded hardware and why they're doing that is because they need larger models, as it were, more parameters, more, processing power to handle that. But what the engineer had said was something along the lines of, there's people out there, not Tesla, but people in general in the field, researchers are doing a lot of work on porting larger models to smaller models and getting this similar performance or better performance. And that's very true, right? Like we all saw that with all the DeepSeek drama recently. There's a lot of push from, research out of, Meta and, other sources where basically they are showing smaller models that are outperforming the older, larger models due to more efficient ways of training and just, techniques in how they're, setting up LLMs and things. Now, obviously, full self-driving does not use an LLM. It's not Chat GPT, but it is using transformers, the same architecture pattern. So it's very similar. So there's a lot of techniques that kind of, come over and, can be equivalently used. So I think it is possible that in the future they could maybe scale things back. The problem is it's a very big unknown, and it's a lot easier to just go to better hardware, especially as better hardware becomes cheaper and cheaper and more available. So
yeah, it's an unknown, and the problem is that it's an unknown where people's lives are on the line, right?
Sure.
It's a safety critical thing as opposed to help me do my English homework, right?
Right.
So that's something to think about. Another thing that came up was that it seemed like he wasn't going to be replacing the camera, so it'd just be the computer. And as we both said, we want the new cameras, but that becomes an unrealistic problem.
Well,
probably labor-wise, that would be rough.
Cameras. Yeah,
that's easy. They pop out, but the connectors are different. So if they want to fish a new wire through, which I guess they could, but I don't think those are the cameras. I mean, those are, that's 2 out of 8 or 9, right?
Yeah.
There are 8 cameras, 9 with the new with Juniper because it has a nose camera.
That's right.
And that nose camera, supposedly sees 180 degrees. That to me, that's a big deal, and that should be part of what builds that vector space of mapping the objects around you. And we've described it before that we think you can kind of decouple those two. So maybe with the fewer or not as high resolution sensors, you still get a vector space that just might not be as good. In that same call, just along the same lines, this is a dumb question to ask, but one of the analysts asked about LiDAR again. Like, Elon is always going to have the same answer, but his question was, if LiDAR were free, would you use it? And Elon's like, no. He's like, we're humans drive, and I've said the same. You would think, well, we're just using visual and driving, right? It's like, humans don't have lasers shooting out of their eyes. That's literally what he said. But really, you still want your car to be superhuman, right? You want your car to be better than me, right?
Yeah.
So technically, we're not just visual. We're also
we hear,
tactile.
We have, yeah.
We feel what the road conditions feel like, and we can hear and things around us. So
yeah. So the car could do that too. I don't know that the car is doing anything auditory. It should be, right? It should listen for sirens and stuff like that, since that's as a human driver, you hear a siren and then you're like, okay, what's going on? Is this something I need to react to? It's just funny that he'll die on that hill. I think if LiDAR were free, I'd freaking include it. Come on, like let's have another modality. Of course, it makes the computational problem harder. But the way he put it is like we had radar in the car and we decided to ignore it. And then he made a big point about demonstrating that he knows what LiDAR is. I'm like, okay, we know you know what LiDAR is. Come on. He's like, I led the team that developed the LiDAR for the Dragon capsule. Well, okay, come on.
Whatever.
Technically, he led every team.
Yeah, exactly. Like,
The
come
CEO.
on. But anyway, so that was that. So we'll get some computers. We don't know when. And, my preference is it happens when it actually makes a difference, not when it just makes it slightly better. It needs to actually make it work, Yeah. Just one more thing, Mike, you were talking about getting a new update. So I came down in a Model Y, still hardware 3, but it recently got a software update. And it was pretty good. It's pretty good, but they changed a bunch of things. This is
almost always do.
12.6.3. I don't know if you've used this yet, Lewis, but dude, I feel like what they've done, and maybe this just because of how it's trained, since it's a neural net now that is making the decisions or whatever. Instead of having a separate choice about how many times it changes lanes and how close are you going to follow and how fast you're going to go, it seems to be that they put those all together. And now you have 3 modes, chill, standard, or hurry.
Yeah.
And it constantly displays it. I was driving it and I'm like, what is the standard?
Yeah. It's got
Why do I
standard up
need
on the screen.
Why do I need the word standard staying there the whole time? Why don't you just tell me what my speed check set point is? It didn't make any sense. Like, why am I staring at this word standard? Until I saw how different the behavior was. And I could only get it to drive, to me, sensibly under hurry. But then it was tailgating people under hurry. I'm like, what the heck?
I stay in standard. Chill is dangerous. But
too passive.
It's way too passive. And I keep it in standard and just kind of deal with it.
Yeah, so I have 12.6.3, and I find myself in standard because of the follow distance and some of that stuff. But then I have to basically manually tell it to change lanes to pass people and stuff like that, because it's like if I wanted to drive at a reasonable speed and actually, like if traffic's going slow and we could be going faster and lanes are open, go use them. So I have to like manually do that. But then I agree with you. It is then stupid when you're in hurry mode, because it's like, oh, I don't need distances. And it's like, no, you still should have distances. I just don't want you to go 50 in a 70, right? Like,
and another thing I couldn't find in the process of driving down here was you used to be able to get it to warn you when it's about to change lanes, like the steering wheel would vibrate or something.
No, it just goes.
And there was nothing.
It just, you hear it going click, click, and starts changing lanes.
So I'm not really sure I like that. And maybe that's a side effect of how it's done now. Train off an aggressive driver versus, a non-aggressive driver or something. But I would really like to be able to decouple those things, because I was trying to find the setting, like it was constantly changing lanes. I'm like, okay, I want you just to stay in this lane for now. And I couldn't find the setting of like, stop changing lanes. It used to be an option, as it wasn't there anymore.
Yeah, it's gone.
Sure.
So that's,
which
to me, that was a step backwards. Yeah, that was a step backwards.
Doug, have you noticed that? I've had this happen several times now. The car will be in a lane, and I'll want it to be in a different lane. I have reasons I want it to be in a different lane.
Yeah.
I'll hit the blinker, and it does everything, and it cancels out the blinker. It doesn't change.
yeah. I had that happen. It's like, nah, I don't want to go there. I asked you to go there. No,
too bad.
Nah. Never mind.
But I'll disengage, change lanes, re-engage. It'll sit there in that lane perfectly that it just refused to go into, 30 seconds ago.
Yeah. What the heck? All right. So,
Anyways,
anyway,
But
so
going
yeah.
back to the topic,
but-
we have to say, yay, we might get a hardware upgrade.
yeah.
dude,
I mean,
don't hold your breath.
when we talked about it a couple weeks ago, there were inklings that they were going to do something. They didn't say what, but they're going to do something. This time it was a bit more specific that he said they're probably going to have to replace the computers. So, you know, there's some motion there. Let's see. We have a comment from Lunic Links. I think one issue with LiDAR is that there is only a certain amount of systems that can operate in the same space at the same time. Not an issue now, but could be later. I mean, I know what you're talking about. This has come up before. If it really was an issue, there are things you could do. You could code your own laser in such a way. I won't go into the details of that sort of thing, but you could code it so you know it's your own laser as opposed to scatter from somebody else's laser. That's a solid problem. It might increase the cost, but that's something you can do. So I'll just put that out there.
Doug used to be a laser physicist.
I spent a lot of time working on lasers. I mean, I would say one thing that came up in the call, like one of the engineers said, well, LiDAR won't work in the fog or something like that. Okay. I mean, that has to do with your choice of wavelength,
Yeah.
Right.
So,
My-
but
my-
yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say my FSD front camera in the windshield doesn't like raindrops. So
Yeah.
Yeah. My vision doesn't work well in the fog either. Like,
Yeah, honestly, my feeling about that is I would like to have more modalities, and every sensor is going to have a regime where they're going to fail.
if you got
And the one I've brought up before is this ridiculous thing of getting a warning that a camera is occluded just because it can't see anything because it's just literally dark there. Well, if you're an active sensor and you just send a pulse out, and then you could see that, well, there is actually nothing there.
Right.
And you could just, and not assume that the camera's covered, So anyway, have all the modalities. You should have X-ray vision, do that too. Why not?
Yep.
on that happy note.
Yeah. Let's move on. Let's see. We had a couple other things that came up, but I don't think they necessarily had to do with the earnings call. Was there anything else in the earnings call that was worth
the
chatting
Tesla.
about?
Optimus.
Yeah, I was gonna say the Tesla semi questions.
Okay.
There was, so basically when asked about Tesla, semi and like how that's going, the Lars Moravi, I don't know, I'm butchering people's names, I'm sorry. He said the first builds of the high volumes in design come late this year in 2025 and begin ramping early 2026. But as we've said before, the semi is a TCO no-brainer. I think it's really similar to Optimus. So, and then Elon jumped in and said, it's not nothing. It might displace a 10 billion a year thing. That's 1 billion a month at some point, probably. But all this is going to pale in comparison to Optimus.
Yeah. Hard to believe the $1 billion a month will pale.
Yes. He said something like it'll be like less than 1% of Optimus or something like that at a different point. But yeah, so basically what that tells us is, high volume for semi is coming later this year.
Maybe.
And they're going to ramp in 2026, which if you're interested in, for those of us that think this will be largely impactful in, EV adoption, in emissions reductions, and all other kind of stuff. It's a good thing, but it's way behind schedule, right?
Yeah.
But hey, they're finally getting there. I wonder what's changed. I wonder what's enabled them to do this now. But
I don't know. I think part of it's been battery. I think
Probably.
semi probably needs a ton of batteries, and so battery production limitations. I think the semi is probably their most important vehicle in terms of impact on the environment. Just think how much the emissions of a single diesel semi and its usage. Like most cars are parked most of the time, most semis are probably driving most of the
24 by
time.
7, yeah.
And that in addition, if they can get FSD working on it too, that can be a big deal. If it ever gets to the point of being autonomous where, the driver can actually go to sleep or something, that would be a big deal. You still need, like loading and unloading kind of stuff but yeah, if it could drive while the driver slept,
Well, I
that
was
would be game
thinking
changing.
of a very specific use case here in San Pedro, not too far from where I live. They've identified the biggest diesel polluting isn't so much the driving to the truck, it's all the idle time at the port, while they wait to get the air sea cargo containers and whatnot.
Ports are terrible. There's the vehicles, there's the boats themselves, which use, bunker fuel, which is like, the dirtiest and cheapest stuff.
It's the cheapest stuff, yeah.
And they tend not to care so much because they're out in the middle of the ocean. So it's not so much a smog kind of, breathing kind of issue, but it's still, high CO2, high particulate, kind of emission. And so when they're in port, it's terrible. And yeah, especially like these trucks where, the driver, they might be sleeping or whatever, and they need it running just for the AC.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think the semi is a big deal. So if they can get that going, I think that would be good. To me, that's also a lower hanging fruit and is more likely to be useful before Optimus is. Okay, so on a similar note, this isn't really so much with the earnings call, but another question we asked was, will a competing company beat Optimus to market? And we asked that, again on the 19th of January. And is there anything else? Is there something that we can buy, Lewis?
There sure is, and I said yes, so I was right. There's a company called Unitree that is already selling a Unitree G1. Now,
oh, wow, look at that.
I can't say for sure that they're shipping yet. They claim
sell
that
it.
they are. They say contact us for delivery time, but you can buy a humanoid agent robot.
$16K bargain.
It's able to do a bunch of things. You can program it to do different tasks. They have a lot of stuff they're showing. I don't know that it's, that useful, but it's probably on par of an Optimus at this point.
Yeah. So if you ever
you
see
can
this,
buy it.
If you ever see video of this thing, it's sort of smaller. It looks like, sort of a pygmy guy. It's like, I think it's like 4 feet something. But it looks pretty agile. And also they sell it, they said starting at $16K, but it seemed like they're selling it more to like if you're a research institution or something like that. It seemed not so much for the consumer.
They have an EDU model, yes.
Yeah, exactly. So it didn't seem so much for the consumer, but for research.
Won't fold my
people.
laundry.
Well, I mean, I think probably some university student would buy it and then try to train it to fold laundry, and that would be like a project or something.
I would probably do that. Except I don't fold laundry; I just hang mine up. But yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if this question is definitively answered already. But the thing is, though, China, there are tons of these sort of robot companies in China showing very impressive things, at least as impressive as Optimus, and they seem pretty poised to sell them. So, and China does manufacturing exceptionally well. I mean, to me, that was the main thing about Tesla, is that, okay, they're likely to actually sell this thing. Whether or not I can do anything useful or not, they're likely to sell it. Well, I think, probably some company in China is also likely to sell it. So, and I think if this thing isn't quite real yet in terms of selling, I think something will be before the end of the year. So,
for sure. But yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Did we have another thing? Okay. Now, and then we had this question here. Again, this isn't quite related to the earnings call. But the question was, will the SLS survive past Artemis 2? And that was a very sort of somewhat esoteric sort of question for, people in the know. But I think most of our audience just listen to the last episode if you want to know what that means. And what happened just a couple days ago, Boeing who was the main contractor on SLS. SLS is the Space Launch System for the moon program called Artemis. And they basically said they may have to. So this is just motion, nothing, you know, nothing definitive, but they may have to lay off a ton of people related to SLS because it could get canceled, you know, when the next budget comes out. And they're sort of required by law. There's this thing called the Warren Act, and I don't remember what that acronym stands for, but it's basically that they need to give 60 days notice to employees if they expect significant layoffs. And so basically because of regulations, they need to do this. But it doesn't bode well. So I don't know if anyone...
And related, when we were at the Astro Awards, right, this was a topic that was brought up a bunch. You got a bunch of space nerds, policy people. There was a former, you know, deputy director of NASA that was there that we got to see. You know, Apollo astronauts, there are all kinds of stuff, but there was a policy expert, and they basically, most of them seemed to imply that they felt that the SLS should be canceled, that SpaceX is doing a much better job, Blue Origin's doing a much better job, that, you know, we should move away from SLS. I think it was Charlie Duke, the astronaut, that actually made some comments saying, look, he didn't think we should cancel it for a few reasons, but primarily because we already have some objectives and timelines around going back to the moon. And so the question is, if you cancel it, can you still meet that, or are you just delaying everything? And so if you could keep it going a little bit longer, but you'd still hit your objectives, then maybe it's worth keeping around, which is a fair argument. I don't know the specifics there. I'm sure Doug, you have some thoughts on it.
Well, my sense was that I think a lot of people missed the meat of that argument, because the main thing he said was, well, we've already spent all this much money, we might as well use it. And instantly you could hear it murmur through the audience, oh, that's a sunk cost fallacy. Like you heard like people literally say that. And of course it occurred to me too, like, wow, that sounds a lot like the sunk cost fallacy. And because of that, I feel like people didn't quite listen to what he really said. And you know, my point of view about it is, yeah, it's a big waste of money. And it shouldn't be here, you know, 5 years from now, certainly not 10 years from now. It's not a sustainable rocket, really. And it hasn't factored in any reuse or anything like that, except maybe the Orion. And the Orion has, you know, issues with its heat shield right now. But I think it should last through, I don't know that it will, but I think it should last through Artemis 3. I think we have a plan for that. We should do Artemis 3. And then after that, we should have, you know, in that time, we should also have competing contracts for private launch vehicles to, you know, continue. Like, the problem is cadence, okay? If SLS was launching every 3 months, it would be a lot cheaper. And of course, that's probably unrealistic. Every 6 months, say. But once every, I don't know, it took how many years to develop, and it launched on a demo mission that, you know, basically just, you know, with nobody on it, to send Orion around the moon. You know, in 2022, that happened. And nothing's happened since. And they've already had to push back Artemis 2 a couple years. It already slipped to 2025, and they're already saying, oh no, it won't happen until 2026 because of the heat shield issues. And honestly, the heat shield issues are bad enough that I wouldn't put anybody on that thing. It's got a straight design flaw, and their solution is, okay, we're just going to change the reentry trajectory so that the heat shield, you know, doesn't suffer so much. Well, okay,
you don't generate as much heat, basically. Yeah.
Well, it had more to do with the duration. So that it'll kind of go down and then come back up and go down, you know, that kind of thing, instead of, you know, just doing okay, whatever. That's not a good idea. I don't know if that's a great idea. But I think as a program, Artemis 2 should happen and Artemis 3 should happen. You know, it's unclear what does Elon want for it? Because I think that's probably a big influence, because I don't think Trump really knows anything about this stuff, and he'll just do what Elon says. Elon may have reasons for wanting Artemis canceled. SpaceX is on the hook for the human landing system for Artemis 3. and basically they proposed Starship as the landing vehicle. Now Starship makes next to no sense as a lander.
Sense.
It's so huge, it's ridiculous. But it's something that's already being developed, and how convenient that okay, now you're getting, you know, NASA money or government money, billions of dollars to help develop this landing system. If Artemis 3 was canceled, then SpaceX would be off the hook for coming up with this lunar lander, yet they still would have reaped all this development money for Starship, which is still ongoing. So that would be that's the kind of negative way to look at it. But really, it doesn't make so much sense as a lander. Even you know, Dr. Robert Zubrin, what did he say? He said it made no sense. It's so huge. Instead of Starship, they should have Starboat. You know, like because it's this huge giant thing. And can you imagine, like, if you had to leave in a hurry, you got to get on this elevator because the crew entry is like way at the top of this tall thing. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I had at this at the Astro Awards, there was like this evening party, and I managed to talk to the guy. I can't remember his name, but he is the dude that does the live like the commentary on the live streams from Boca Chica for SpaceX. So he works for SpaceX. This was during those during the launch events for Starship. And he was saying, yeah, maybe they should do a star skiff, they called it. You know, at least that's more alliterative than starboat. But yeah, dude, Starship landing makes no sense. It's so huge, and that's not what it's designed for. You know, it's designed to be a Mars lander, really.
If you think about it, like with Apollo, we built something that was landing that didn't need you to have infrastructure on the ground and then take off again, right? Like, you don't want to have to build up a bunch of infrastructure to then be able to use it. If we had infrastructure, if we had bases, if we had pads on the moon, then sure, you could land it. But it still wouldn't necessarily make sense because of the amount of fuel and other things you're using. But anyway, so it is silly. But
I mean, that's a real thing. It's yet to be seen that Starship could land on the moon and then launch again. I mean, we already saw what happened to Starship launching from concrete that got loose and blew up and went into and destroyed the nozzles or whatever, at least on the super heavy booster. You know, I think what they had in part of the design were some thrusters that were further up around the top or the middle of the Starship, and maybe they would need to fire those to lift it up a bit before the main engines. I don't really know what the plan is there, but it's not a great design, I don't think. Yeah, and what Apollo did was basically the lander had two pieces, so they had the landing part, but then the actual sort of crew module of the lander separated, and so it basically landed with its own launch pad, you know.
Right.
So anyway.
Jinx.
Jinx.
But yeah, so that's cool. I don't know. Did we have any other predictions? I think
that was probably the last one in terms of predictions, and certainly how they interface with what we learned from that Q4 earnings report. So
okay. And let's see, we already did touch on the downturn. I don't know. Did I miss anything?
We had a couple other things we could chat about. There was that Tesla, I guess a couple weeks ago. Actually, they showed it at the Cybercab event. They showed it in video, but didn't say anything about it. But they had this robot that just sucks. That's how they put it.
This robot sucks is the title of the video.
That's right. Cleaning robot.
Yeah. Let me get that up. Okay, it's there.
Well, you were equating that with the little self-plug-in snake that they were talking about for the recharge.
Yeah. Well, so they showed a charging snake before, and that was like a grad project of someone who went to go work at SpaceX. So that was never really going to be anything. And my sense of that was it had way too many degrees of freedom necessary, anyway.
Right.
So that didn't make a whole lot of sense. Tesla has already shown that the route they're going to go is inductive charging built underneath the vehicle, as opposed to a robot plugging it in, but I still think a robot plugging it in made a little more sense, even if it plugged in from below or something, than having to deal with the inductive losses. But they seem to think that they have an inductive scheme that has relatively low losses, like, better than 90% efficiency. I have yet to see that, but okay, if you say you do, and that's the route they're going.
I have to say, I totally want one of these for my garage. Like, I don't, I don't need it to do this all the time, but like, I hate cleaning a car. It's one of those things that's just annoying to me. If I could have a thing that auto vacuums and it sucks out the water bottles and all the other nonsense, like, that'd be great.
It would be nice to have something on the Roomba level where it's like, it just happens every day when you park, and then so it's not having to do some huge cleaning job every time. It's just it's stopping the accumulation, the build up.
Yeah, clean the touchscreen for me. See, I want that. I want the clean the touchscreen every time. I don't have to do it. Anyway.
Well, if it's doing all that, I want it to clean the exterior too.
That's fair. Hey, let's do it. We have this arm, like, clean the exterior too. I don't know. What are your thoughts? Do you think this is just what they're setting up for their depots in Austin?
I don't know. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Here I thought they'd have Optimus in there cleaning the car.
It's not an Optimus. Clearly, it's too hard for Optimus to do it.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've had this discussion. Typically, if you have a specific purpose, you're probably better off designing a robot for that specific purpose.
Yes.
But this kind of job is a rather nuanced job. So it's hard to say. Like what they're showing here, it just looks it looks too ideal. Like, what if there's bubble gum on the seat? What if someone barfed and it got in the cracks of the seat? I mean, this doesn't look like it's cleaning enough.
I was going to say, my kids have been known to trash a car a lot worse than this, just going to the grocery market.
I mean, vacuuming is good and a basic wipe down is good, but this won't do it. This doesn't look like a deep clean. Yeah. So I don't know.
Although, honestly, I've been in some cabs that aren't much better. So,
and how many would they need? And I guess they would do it while it's charging, or
probably, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
I'm not sure it makes sense. Do you think this was just a marketing gimmick and they're not actually planning on using these for the Robocab fleet?
I mean, by the time you buy the robot, you program it, you spend all the capital, you can hire a couple guys to go in there and scrub a car out a lot faster.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, it is, at this point, it's the kind of thing where it'd be cheaper to hire somebody. But I mean, their goal is to eliminate those kind of workers, right? So it seems to be the goal of Optimus. So yeah, I don't know, man. What I'm looking at right now doesn't necessarily look that useful to me.
Sure.
But maybe it could be. It would be nice as a service, like when I just park to supercharge, could you give me a clean? Actually, you know what? I've seen, not robots, but people set up near superchargers doing these kind of services. Like somewhere in the Northeast
kind of thing, or clean.
Yeah, somewhere in the Northeast. And there was just some dude, they had a little company set up and they had a little tent set up, and they would, clean your car for you.
Rove Chargers has gotten very close to that. So they've got superchargers set up. They're covered, canopied over. You can pay to get the car washed, touchless if you want. And then they've got an area that you can park the car, wipe it down, free vacuum cleaner, free air. I mean, it's not much of a stretch to have another stall or two where you're willing to pay somebody to do a light detail. And they've got the waiting areas already set there. They've already got the areas set up. You got Wi-Fi, you got food you can buy, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. Marketing gimmick.
Yeah, but it works.
Yeah. All right.
Alrighty.
Anything else you wanted to hit?
I should be asking you that question.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you want to talk about that gamer thing?
I mean, we can. Yeah, we can talk about it. I mean,
It's a little old news now.
it's a little old news. It's been a couple
But
weeks.
it hit close to home for you, did it?
It did. Yeah. So,
Can you give us
basically-
context then?
Sure. I'll give you the context. So basically, Elon has claimed in the past that he's a bit of a gamer, right? He started even when he was a teenager. He supposedly made a video game or whatever and sold it or made money off of that when he was a kid. So he's been into games and video games for years and years. And one of the very popular games, in the franchise known as Diablo, they had a Diablo 4 that came out. It was very popular. There was the original Diablo was back in the 90s, so it would have been when Elon was prime video gaming age before he was running all his companies. And so anyway, so there he basically there's competitive ladders, there's all these, rankings and stuff of like where you are and how high up you are in rankings. And Elon was essentially one of the top players in the world, or so he claimed. He had this character, and it was, among all the millions of people worldwide, he was in the top 20, which is very impressive considering majority of the top 20 are literally people that play video games for a living and stream it all day long. That is their job. That's how they make money. And Elon is the CEO of multiple companies. Nowhere possible has the time to actually put into those games as necessary. But
Well, he has
people
the time to run 3 companies and work in the government too, right? So he must
exactly.
have
There you go.
copies of himself.
So, people kind of like said it's unlikely, but whatever. We didn't push too much. He streamed it a few times. He streamed him playing this game, whatever. It's Diablo 4 game. And then another game came out called Path of Exile 2, which is a very similar game, except it is a lot more hardcore. It is a lot more unforgiving. It requires way more knowledge, way more effort. I'm a big fan. I've played, Path of Exile 1 a lot and play hardcore on that. And basically you can't make any mistakes when you're playing on hardcore. If you do any mistake, your character dies and your character's gone, basically. So that's why it's like such a challenge of can you get through. And so it came out again, like Elon, he's got this character. It's one of the top in the world. I don't remember the exact place, but he was, in the top 10 on the ladder. And look at him. He's, so good, blah, 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 blah. And at this point, Diablo 4, okay, maybe it's unlikely, but maybe. But Path of Exile 2, there's no way. We're all the hardcore gamers like, there is no way. You would have to devote thousands of hours. He does not have the time. He's doing Doge in the government. He's running his company. It's impossible. There's no way he could do this. And so he claimed that he streamed it live. And from his live stream, it was immediately obvious to anybody that plays the game that he has not really ever played this game and he had no idea what he was talking about. And there was a lot of amusing things that would come up like, oh, look, his character is logged in right now while he's live on television at the inauguration for Trump. stuff like that.
Yeah, and I think they could look at the IP address and it was in China or something, right?
And basically, he did actually eventually come. So at one point, he was playing, didn't know what he was doing, got his character killed.
He didn't.
Right?
He didn't get the chaos orbs,
and he didn't know how the inventory. He didn't know
I have
basically
no idea
about
what
the
that
game
means.
and how it works.
I don't know
Anyway,
anything about it, but yeah,
it was very funny. And so he did eventually come out and admit that yes, he was paying people to boost his accounts and to play the characters. But
like you have to do.
But he tried to downplay it as, well, yeah, but you have to. Everybody that's in the top does that. And
Everyone in Korea does it, he said, I think.
Yeah. And
Or
the
Asia.
answer is
Everyone in Asia does it.
no. Nobody at the top is doing that. They actually are playing the game. It's ridiculous that he's, I will say there are certain cultures in online video games where they don't view paying to win. We often say pay to win, spending money to have an advantage. They don't view that as a negative. In the West, we tend to view it as a negative. We think it's essentially cheating, but there are cultures in video games where they don't view it that way. But yeah, anyway, it was very funny. Elon was trying to appear cool, trying to fit in and say that he's a gamer and look at me, I'm doing all this stuff. It claimed it was him until we definitively had proof that it wasn't him. And then he was like, oh yeah, you're right. It wasn't me. But everyone does it. So it's fine. Anyway, so I just thought that was funny. I found it amusing. My friends group that are all big gamers, it was a big deal to them because they're not necessarily big into Tesla. They don't necessarily follow Elon stuff that closely, but suddenly in internet meme culture it became a thing, so it was kind of amusing. But yeah, Elon wanting to be a hardcore gamer, he is not. He can't be because he actually has jobs and other stuff to do. I don't even consider myself a hardcore gamer anymore because of my career and other things. But sure, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, I was. But anyway, so
it's a weird thing to do.
Yes.
Let me just put it that way.
To lie about.
Yeah, and a lot of people, for a lot of people, it was kind of like a sort of a revelation to them. To me, having followed Elon and Tesla for nearly 20 years now, it is actually not surprising, and it kind of plays into his personality. Something I just don't really get, but Elon does massage the truth quite a bit, particularly about things to do about himself, like his personal accomplishments, and the thing I always get about it is like, dude, it's impressive enough. Like the things you're doing are impressive enough. You're already like the best at whatever, and certainly like he never quite struck me as a science or engineering genius, because I've met people that are like legit science and engineering geniuses. But he certainly wants to be perceived as one as part of his persona, and that's fine, whatever. But dude, like certainly he's probably the single most important person in the history of Tesla as a company. But he didn't found it, right? But he made a big deal about eventually being and rewriting history to make himself a founder of the company when he wasn't. That was Mark and Martin. But okay, fine. But it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Like the kind of things he will do, like he was accepted at Stanford, right? Accepted at Stanford. That's interesting enough,
Impressive,
but
yeah.
Impressive enough, yeah. But to be like, oh, I dropped out of Stanford the first day of school or whatever, that's part of the narrative he spends, which, I did grad school at Stanford. That might make sense as an undergrad. That doesn't make any sense as a grad student. Right? This just doesn't make sense as a grad student to say, oh, I dropped out the first day. You have an advisor, you take a leave of absence or something, that's more, that's more how it is.
I mean, even the whole, physics thing, which there's pretty much proof he never actually studied, like was a physics major at UPenn. Going
he
to
took some
UPenn is
physics
impressive.
classes.
He had some physics classes, but he went to UPenn. I think his degree was in economics, which is fine.
Yeah.
He went to Wharton, which is already it's like one of the
best,
top
one of the best business
if not
schools,
the best
yeah.
business schools in the world. Like, you're already impressive. You don't need to embellish. And
Yeah.
whenever he does this, what's funny is it causes people to start digging in and question, like, well, wait, what are these other things he talks about? Because, for example, when the whole Twitter thing happened and the X purchase, he started saying a lot of things publicly that came out that made a whole generation of software engineers go, wait a minute, I don't think he clearly doesn't know what he's talking about when it comes to computer software, because he's saying a lot of things that we know about that, like, that makes no sense. And then you go, well, wait, does he do this for things that I don't know about, that I just take for granted and like assume that he knows what he's talking about?
Yeah.
And that's what happens. The whole gaming thing made a whole people that I know that went, wait a minute, does he? So like, he clearly doesn't know what he's talking about and he's lying. Does he do that with other things? And it's like, yeah, he does.
Yeah.
Yeah. And back to Stanford, since that's something I know about, right? Like he was going to Stanford to study high energy storage systems. I think it was basically like, supercapacitors or something like that. And I saw him in interviews where he basically lets the person think he's going to Stanford to study high energy physics, which is something different completely. That's like, particle physics and, working with a linear accelerator or whatever.
Right. And Stanford wouldn't even be where you'd want to go to do that.
No, you could do that at Stanford. Come on, we got the Stanford Linear Accelerator. It doesn't matter. Anyway, if you were to do that stuff at Stanford, it would be in the physics department. Sure. And he let people think he was doing physics, but what he was talking about was really material science, which is fine, which is a fine discipline. But if you're like among those things, there's among nerds, there's kind of a hierarchy, right?
Yep.
You'll have physics at the top, and then electrical engineering, and then like material science is somewhere down the line, right?
Some people would argue that mathematics is at the top.
Okay,
but
that goes
for
separate.
For a purity.
Yeah, for a
thing.
purity thing, mathematics at the top. But
Sure.
when we're talking science and engineering, we actually
Right.
set mathematics like
we
lateral.
we don't consider that. Yeah.
It's just a different thing. But typically, to put it more succinctly, that what defines the hierarchy is how much math you need to know.
Right.
So the physics is at the top, and material science is somewhere down. Like biology is even lower, or whatever. Even though it's very complicated systems, right? I hate to say this because people are going to send me hate mail, but
Yep.
the point is that he was more likely accepted for material science. But guess what? Physics sounds better. Dude,
It's cooler. Sounds
you
cooler.
are a amazingly successful businessman. Okay, you don't need to make us think you're some physics genius. It's just not necessary. But somehow that's part of his personality, is he needs to be perceived as that.
Well, and it's not just him. One of my favorite YouTubers, Dr. Angela Collier, she has a channel on. She's a PhD physicist, right? And basically has a bunch of a whole video complaining about billionaires trying to pretend to be physicists because they've all done it. Like a lot of them do it. And basically the notion is that in society, physics is viewed as one of the most difficult, most challenging fields, probably because of the amount of mathematics you need to know for science, right?
I
don't think that it is. It's just that's how it's viewed. And people, because of famous, brilliant minds, people say, "Oh, this is a super genius." It's always a physicist in the past, for the most part, Einstein and Newton and all this stuff. So there's this connotation of like, oh, these really great and brilliant men. And so there's a whole slew of billionaires that basically want to come off as being they were physicists. And the funny thing is, it's like all of you could be physicists. Just go and be a physicist. Just go to school and get your degree. You have the means, you have the money. Just go do it if you want to do it. None of them actually do that. None of them go to school. None of them have a degree in it or do any of the work. But they want people to think that they are. So it's always I could have been a physicist, but I had to become a billionaire instead. And it's just like, cool, good for you.
I would say, though, I don't know that it's the society in general, but it's certainly the nerd tech subset.
Tech society. Sure.
Because probably all of us in that regime had to take some physics classes. And we're among the people to know that, oh, here are the people that are good at physics, and here are the people that aren't, and that was some differentiator. I would say, I think Bezos, though, was like the guy who basically said, yeah, I'm not as good as this other guy at this. I'm not going to try to be a theoretical physicist.
Bezos is the only billionaire I've seen that actually came out and said, he was a physics major, and he said, I'm not good enough to be a great physicist, so I'm going to go into this other thing that I feel I could be great in, because he recognized there are other people smarter and better at it, that he just wasn't there. So he is the one exception, which I agree with, that like actually fairly said that. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely true. I was originally a computer science major, and I was bored. I didn't find it challenging, so I literally switched to physics as my major because I was like, well, that's the hardest darn thing I can pick, so I'm just going to do that, right? Like, I get it. It's definitely in nerd and science culture how it works. But yeah, anyway, so yes.
Yeah.
It's a common thing, though. He's not the only billionaire. A lot of them have done this. A lot of tech billionaires,
I don't know to this extent, though, about so many, not just physics, but so many other aspects of his life. He's had to tailor the things that he's the best at, whatever it is he does. And there are some weird things that kind of happened for a short period of time. Like at some point, it was like, oh, I'm going to play the violin. And I think he gave that up really quickly because, hey, guess what? Smart people play the violin or something, right? It's like, come on. Come on. What are you doing? So I don't know, whatever. He's got these personality quirks, but you got to worry a bit now. Then he's in such a high power position. It's just like, okay, dude. And I've said it before, I'll say it again. We have the Elon alignment problem. And, like the AI alignment problem, here's the Elon alignment problem. Hopefully things he does are for the benefit of mankind, but I'm, a little bit concerned it's mostly for the benefit of one man as opposed to mankind. And all we can do is hope that our interests align. somewhat, and that we benefit more than we suffer. So there you go.
Indeed. Alrighty. Well,
on
I
that
guess that
on that happy note.
on that happy note, I guess that wraps it. Yeah. Oh, look, we have a comment from Gray Snowfox. Yeah, we appreciate that. He said, finally, some normal people who love Tesla as the company being realistic and honest about Elon. All justified and reasonable criticism and discussion. Subscribed, liked with notifications on. Thank you. Thank you,
Okay,
Gray.
great.
Thank you, Gray. We appreciate that. Yeah, we always try to be somewhat realistic,
Normal.
and we want Tesla to be successful. We love the products. We want them to produce good products for the consumers. We are all consumers, and yeah, so appreciate that. On that note, I guess we'll wrap things up. This has been episode 72. So as always, thank you all for listening and watching. Thanks for hanging out. We appreciate it. Thanks for the questions and comments. Keep it coming. Like and subscribe. You can always check out teslamotorsclub.com as our website. There's a lot of interesting forums and posts on there for good Tesla info. You can become a supporting member on the website. As always, that helps in contributing to the website and the podcast. And we'll see you next time.
Laters.
Say laters now. Yeah.
Yeah, laters.